So if I was a CIO or a managing partner for a full service law firm, this is the playbook I would implement to automate processes as far as possible. So legal, just like any other services, professional services businesses, inherently struggle to scale customers without scaling the cost of human capital required to fulfill those services. Why? Well, simply put, these processes are very knowledge-centric in nature, and it's hard today to automate knowledge-centric processes. We'll come back to that point in a little while. But nevertheless, if we look across the delivery cycle of a particular legal service, then there are plenty of opportunities. So let's dive into those. So the first thing I'd start with is look at establishing shared service centers. And essentially, this is the low-hanging fruit in our process automation opportunities. So what does a shared service center mean? Well, our goal here is to take cross-practice, high-volume, low-complexity work out of those practice groups and run them as scalable, automated processes. Because traditionally, shared service centres haven't really, in your mid-sized firms predominantly, have really only been limited to non-legal functions, right? Finance, HR, maybe post for a bit of compliance or what have you, yeah? But for me, that's missing loads of opportunity. So broadly, what we're looking to do there is establish a service catalogue. And, it's a big word, but conceptually a menu of services that you could offer out to your practice groups and a menu that you can look to expand over time. So maybe starting with client matter inception, but then adding document review or due diligence or what have you. And there's a lot of things to add to that service catalogue. So my second item then would be about adding measurable outcomes to that service catalogue. So I'd encourage you, as I think I've spoken about in previous posts, about adopting some of the standard stuff from Lean Six Sigma, right? To understand the hopefully growing, and indeed it should be, growing effectiveness of those processes. So the top measures for me would be cycle time, right? How long does it take to do this? We should be reducing cycle times, yeah? The second one for me, and I think it's super important, and I go on and on about it in my business, so my people hate me for talking about this, but right first time. In any process, if you have to revisit it, it's inherently inefficient rather. And people often talk about this as first pass yield, right? And it came from manufacturing, right? You want to get things built and not have to repair them halfway through the process. Same for legal processes. My third measure would be cost to deliver. I mean, certainly in Shared, we can measure exactly how much of the human capital you're putting in to a particular process. So you're able to measure that. And finally, I would add customer satisfaction, and that might be determined by surveys, feedback mechanisms, or net promoter score or whatever, right? Typically, those customers for shared service centers are going to be internal ones. Doesn't matter, right? You still want to know their satisfaction. So my third item in my playbook would be about once you've got past all of those shared service centers, low-hanging fruit, and there's a lot of value to be found in that low-hanging fruit, would be around identification of the highest value practice-specific processes to automate. And hey, this stuff is hard, right? Because if we look at a full service law firm, you've got 12, 15, whatever it is, practice groups. Each practice group has got hundreds of processes. So you've maybe got 500 processes, 1,000 processes in your process catalog. Which ones do we start with? How do we identify the ones with the highest value? So I would, again, look at categorizing those. I'd consider four things, right? I'd start off looking at frequency and volume. So like high volume processes, brilliant candidates, yeah? Next off, and exactly the same as my measures, right? I'd look at resource allocation and cost. So ones that involve lots of human capital, lots of time, lots of labor, a really good candidate. I'm going to spend a bit longer on this third point because I'd look at process complexity and risk of failure. So complex processes, multiple steps, yeah? But more interesting, perhaps, is complex processes that involve handoffs between different practice groups or teams or departments or internal and external participants. And it's always those handoffs that increase the risk of failure, right? Someone forgets to pick up an email typically or whatever, it goes off the bottom of their inbox, right? Suddenly the customer's unhappy because something's completely got forgotten. So they are beautiful candidates. Likewise, I'll probably lump into that group processes that require a high amount of rules to execute. Maybe fixed recoverable costs is a great example, right? And my fourth bit of identification would be one processes that impact directly on customer experience. So ones that are really going to delight the customer. Hey, we want to give those an extra weighting. So I take all those bits into my process catalog, and that's going to start to flush out. And obviously, we're going to use a bit of subjective as well as objective measures on those, and possibly some political ones as well. But that's going to give me my order of attack. So I have an order of attack, and this brings me on to my fourth bit of the playbook. So you're going to want to keep attacking the order of attack, right? So you need to establish continuous process improvement as an organizational norm. You're going to be wanting to do project 1, initiative 2, mini incremental process improvement, and you're going to be wanting to do them fast and regular, right? It needs to become part of your organizational norm. Now, for me, I'm a big fan of moving away from centralized IT for this sort of process change, right? Central IT is super important for standards, for the infrastructure, for enterprise architecture and all that sort of thing. But for me, I think IT needs to follow patterns that HR has championed for, I know it must be close to a decade now, right? Within HR, they talk about business partners for HR. And I think we should be talking about the same thing in IT, yeah, business partners for IT. And following the HR model, right, you take the resource out of centralized HR and you put them in business units. And it's exactly the same in this model. You should put those process improvement people within your practice groups, yeah? And hence they're empowered to continuously improve those practice-specific processes. That's involving a lot of short, sharp mini projects. It could be as simple as rolling out a new document template. Potentially, high volume document templates is, really good value to be yielded from that. Or it could involve more complex initiatives. Good examples would maybe like a litigation tracker. That's an example of a high risk of failure and significant impact of failure type process. So litigation tracker, great example. Streamlining witness statements, expert reports, or maybe looking about creating maybe a shared service center for post completion. Super high value, super practice specific, and in the grand scheme of things, relatively easy to achieve. Again, we're going to be measuring these things, and we need to see them improve. So back to cycle time, cost to serve, and all of that. My fifth item would be start preparing for AI. And I've covered that in depth, right, in a post around, I think it was titled something like, if I was the CEO of a large law firm looking to prepare for AI, what's the one thing I would start doing now? And for me, that's about data quality, getting your data right, because it's that data that will power the automation of knowledge-centric processes in the future.